Hello, Worldview listeners. I want to take a moment and give a shout out to my friend Luke and his team at increasecreative.co. This season of our podcast, Luke has been helping with his team there to produce the content that I hope that's been a blessing and encouragement to you. It's been a help to me to have his behind the scenes work, and I want to give him a shout out and let you guys know about his company. Increasecreative.co is a great partner for you to consider for powerful church communication. Luke's team can create custom websites, compelling graphic designs. They help with original video and, as you've noticed, original podcast content. It allows people like you, people like me, to connect with our communities. So I'd encourage you to let them handle the creative aspect of what you need help with so you can focus on your mission. Take a moment, visit increasecreative.co to learn more about how Luke can help you. That's increasecreative.co.
Welcome to Worldview, a podcast featuring teaching and conversations with Dr. Mike Lester that focus on helping faithful disciples develop a biblical worldview. Thanks for joining us, and here's your host, Mike Lester.
Well, hello, and welcome back to another episode here of Worldview with J. Michael Lester. I am delighted that you've joined us today. I am excited about the direction that we're taking in this season of our podcast. We're learning how to think with a biblical worldview when we're processing impossible circumstances, what some might call their Red Sea moment. And we're learning how to move forward when the path isn't clear. And this isn't just for leaders of churches or leaders of Christian schools, minister leaders. It isn't just for those who are perhaps leading organizations, multi-million-dollar organizations. It's for those who are leading homes. It's for those who are learning how to lead themselves. And I pray that whoever listens will be able to find some help with just some principles that allow us to think biblically when we feel like we've hit a brick wall and don't know which way to move. I mentioned in the introductory episode previously that as we introduced this topic, that there was a free resource that Veritas Baptist College had made available through Truthline Press. The book that you can receive is entitled Go Forward, Leading When the Path Isn't Clear. It's about 175, 200-page book, and it basically walks through a lot of the content we're covering in this season's episodes of this podcast. But it gives you a chance to maybe dig deeper, to meditate, to maybe work through some discussion questions or application questions, things that maybe we don't have the time to do on this particular episode each week. So if you haven't downloaded the book I mentioned, I'd encourage you to go to the college website at Veritas Baptist College. That's vbc.edu/go-forward. That's it. You'll fill out a quick little form that asks for a name and email address, and then we will immediately send that out to you in a PDF format, and you can begin reading that even today. But if you haven't got it, it would help as you go through this season with Worldview. So I was thinking about in the introductory process, how do we move as individuals, as leaders, when we just feel so overwhelmed that we can't take the next step physically? We just physically feel like taking the next step seems impossible. And we're at that point where it's even hard to think rationally. And our mind is playing tricks on us, and we are battling emotions, and we're just overwhelmed. We don't know what to do. And I began to think through sort of this process that has helped me, and I pray that it will help many others. It's a 3-step process, so sort of a 3 phases, a movement of 3 different places we sort of process through this decision we need to make. And the first step is just sort of understanding the difficulty that we're in, understanding the situation that we're in. And I want to just give you a little bit of encouragement. I mentioned that sort of the underlying motif behind the thoughts that are in this season, Go Forward, stems from Moses's event, his circumstances that he found himself in at the Red Sea. There at the Red Sea, the Egyptian army is coming from behind. The Red Sea is imposing in front. There's no place to go. And yet God says, go forward. Here's the encouragement I want us to just have framing that whole conversation. The very fact that Moses is at the Red Sea is because God led him there. Moses and the people he's leading aren't there because they've been rebellious. They're not there because they've made a wrong turn in Albuquerque. They're not there because they decided to do it their own way and they did that which is right in their own eyes. They aren't there because it's some type of punishment or chastening hand of God. No, they're there because God led them there. And the encouragement is this: sometimes God leads us to uncomfortable places for several reasons. First and foremost, because it reminds us to give him glory when we go through it and we come out on the other side. Another reason is it develops our own leadership roles and our responsibilities and our skill sets. And then perhaps even another takeaway from these uncomfortable moments is our faith is strengthened personally. We become more deeply rooted as people of faith, trusting in the sovereignty and the providence and the leadership and the provision of God. And so as we begin to unpack some of these principles, I just want to understand at the very beginning that the fact that you find yourself in a difficult situation, an impossible situation, a Red Sea moment, doesn't mean that you have missed God's will. In fact, many times it's these bumps along the way that are part of God's will. So take heart. God has something in this moment, and it's more than just get you through it. God is going to teach you something about himself, about you, about the people you lead, while you're in the middle of it. I want to start today as we sort of probe into this first principle. The first principle is learning how to assess the situation properly, biblically, realistically. And I start with a quote from Jim Collins. Jim Collins wrote the book Good to Great. In the book, he says, greatness begins by confronting the facts, however brutal they may be. We've talked about the fact that God sometimes leads us to uncomfortable places. In those uncomfortable moments, if we're going to lead and go forward, we have to confront the facts as they really are. We don't often overshare as men, and I won't give you a lot of details, but I will give you a little bit of a context where this is coming from. Several years ago, I found myself in a moment of my life that just stopped me in my tracks. I mean, this life event came seemingly out of nowhere, blindsided. I felt like someone was trying to rewrite my future without my permission. And I will tell you that in the beginning part of this event, man, my emotions ran the gamut. Distraught, anxious, confused, disappointed, frustrated, overwhelmed. There were days that I literally struggled to even come out of my office to see people because I was just weeping because of a burden that I was feeling. It was a heavy burden and a difficult moment. Unprepared for it. I thought that these were the things that only happened to people who stepped outside of God's will and they found these difficulties. That wasn't the case. And as I was working through this moment in my life, I have to be honest with you. The mental state I found myself in, I just was so overwhelmed. It was hard to think straight. It was hard to try to see what was the next step. It was hard to see a way out of this or through this or around this. Is this difficult? Perhaps I'm speaking to people today who that resonates with you. You've been in similar situations. Every solution just seemed out of reach. You realize quickly that Bible college and seminary didn't cover this. And granted, moments of clarity would come through all of this as well. And in moments of clarity, you stop and take a breath and say, look, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who's gone through something like this. And I'm sure other people have experienced far worse. And you give yourself that pep talk. And then you swing the other way, right? And I know reading through the Bible that there's some Bible heroes there that maybe sometimes we'll read their story too quickly. And knowing the end of the matter, we sort of read over the trauma, the emotional pain, the unsettledness. We have Joseph going from the pit to the palace, like that's one point in our sermon. We don't stop and think about what was it like when the future was just so unsettling, when the circumstances were so distraught and uncomfortable, when it felt like every time you tried to do right, you got pushed back a step and more. Knowing that God had given you a glimpse of the future, but it didn't seem like that was working out. Talk about someone having their future rewritten without permission. I think Joseph qualifies. He goes from favored son to forgotten slave in just a matter of moments. I think of David at Ziklag. David, the man after God's own heart, but at that moment, 1 Samuel 30, David's own men spake of stoning him. I don't know how the situations are of the people you lead. Maybe you've come to that point. I've come to the point where I've made some people mad. I've come to the point where I've made people maybe disappointed in me, my knowledge. And if I'm wrong, please don't tell me. To my knowledge, I don't think I've ever had a mutiny behind the scenes where they've actually spoke about stoning me. And yet this is where David finds himself. Elijah, after his greatest victory, is wallowing under a tree, wishing for death. John the Baptist, who baptizes the very Son of God, is in prison and he's going to be beheaded. Even the great apostle Paul writes, and we skip over this, but he writes, I despaired even of life. We don't really even give that credit because, in our minds, we've built up this super Christian who never has problems, who even in prison is preaching and he's so powerful, the door is open. And yet Paul tells a different story if we'll listen. There are moments in life when we face impossible circumstances, and the first step to moving forward is learning how to assess them. So there's two mistakes I just want to give us to think about that we need to work through, at least be aware of. When we're in the middle of these moments, these maybe defining moments of life, or at least defining moments of leadership, there's two mistakes that we can lean to. They're basically two sides of the ditch that we could fall off on. The first mistake is we can over-exaggerate. And let's be honest, in times of overwhelming circumstances, there's a temptation to over-exaggerate how difficult it is. Imaginations run wild, fears are running rampant and on high alert. Stress is through the roof. We're not thinking clearly. And so in our mind, we have written something off as maybe hopelessly lost. And yet, if we've lived long enough, hindsight has shown us that those situations weren't as hopeless as we first imagined. I'm not downplaying the difficulty. Is it difficult? Absolutely. The situation I just briefly glossed over personally, I wouldn't want to go through that again. Did I learn some things about myself there? Sure. Did I learn some things about God there? Sure. Were the lessons valuable? Absolutely. Am I a better believer today, a more mature believer today? I hope so. A stronger leader today? I think so. Would I want to repeat it? No. Was it difficult? Absolutely. Absolutely. Was it as bad as I first initially thought? Well, hindsight being 2020, probably not. It's bad, but hindsight being 2020 wasn't as bad as I initially thought. It wasn't hopeless. How can anything be hopeless when we serve the God of the impossible? So first step, learn how to assess the situation. Don't make it worse than it is. It may be bad. It's okay. It's okay to say that. But it's not necessarily Chicken Little and the sky is falling bad. It's, the second mistake swings the other way. And here we don't over exaggerate. Here we underestimate. Maybe we were raised with the notion that real men don't cry. Strong leaders are going to make it happen. The situation, no, it's not bad. No, everything's good. How you doing today, Mike? It's fine. Life is fine. We know that's the standard answer we can get at any church service. How you doing today? Fine. And if we stop long enough to just consider, they're probably lying to us, and we're probably lying to them half the time. It's not fine. But we say it is. We just want to hold on to the sun will come out tomorrow. We want to have a Pollyanna outlook. But presumption isn't faith. A Pollyanna mindset doesn't fix the situation or resolve the crisis or help us move forward. Positive thinking, great, but it doesn't change anything necessarily. Difficulties come, and they are coming. There's nothing wrong with recognizing a difficult situation for what it is. So the extreme here is don't over exaggerate it. You're assessing where God has put you. Don't underestimate it. The difficulties are there for a reason. Great, Mike, but what do I do with this? I'm in the middle of it. Give me some practical steps to just consider, to chew on, to contemplate. Look, God's called us to courageous leadership. One of the prerequisites for courageous leadership is clarity. We need clarity. The impossible moment isn't as bad as your worst nightmares imagine them to be. The power of positive thinking isn't going to change it to what you wished it would be. Pretending that everything is great and fine and well doesn't change the environment. We need to stop for a moment and gain clarity. We need to assess the situation correctly, not emotionally, but just gathering the facts. Where has God led me? What is the real situation that I'm in? And assess it. So here's some just practical takeaways that maybe will give you some food for thought. This one is hard for me, this first one. I tend to run at pretty fast pace. It's that type A drive. I find myself, moving from event to event to event. And perhaps that resonates with some of you. Perhaps that overwhelms some of you because you're wired totally different. But this one for me is difficult, but it's something I have to practice. And the first step here is learn to slow down before you speed up. Sometimes it's just wise to step away from social media, from emails, to put the phone on focus, do not disturb. Sometimes the to-do list needs a break. Take 24 to 48 hours before making a non-urgent decision. Avoid emotional reactions. Avoid that leadership instinct to just do something. Sometimes we just need a walk. Sometimes we just need to catch our breath. Sometimes we just need to whisper a prayer. Slow down for just a moment before we just, all right, it's a difficult situation. I'm just going to go in like a bull in a china shop and make it happen. That's how we have catastrophes and casualties and the residual effects that maybe we didn't want. So slow down. Get the biblical view, get God's mind on the situation you're in. See it from his perspective. Number 2, name what's really happening. What really is happening in this moment, this crisis, this Red Sea decision, if you will. What is really happening? Don't confuse symptoms with a cause. We can never accurately assess a situation until we know what's factually true. So we have to learn how to separate emotion, which is hard. We have to learn how to separate hearsay until we verify it. In this point, what I'm really saying is just check your assumptions and go back to that old classic TV show, Just the Facts, ma'am. Just the facts. What are the facts? The indisputable, non-negotiable facts of the situation, the circumstance that God has brought you to. Because that's what you're going to deal with. Emotions are going to fluctuate like mine was fluctuating from frustration to anger to everything in between. Yours are going to fluctuate. We can't make emotional decisions for something this big. So slow down before you take off again. And then name what's really happening. Understand the facts of the situation. Here's a third practical tip. Identify what you're feeling and why. Emotions aren't sinful in and of themselves. Emotions are God-given. We don't want to be controlled by emotions. We don't want to respond sinfully as a result of our emotions. But ask, what are you afraid of? What is it in this situation that feels the most threatening? Here's a tough one. Be willing to ask, have I attached my identity too tightly to this decision? I spent 26 and a half years at a college in California, West Coast Baptist College. Poured my life there. I was there the day the college opened. I have great friends there. I have wonderful memories there. And I knew God was stirring my heart to move to something different. I couldn't explain it. I didn't really want it, frankly. I had started to wrap my identity around who I was in connection to that role. I was someone who got things accomplished. I was a builder. I was someone who was impacting people's lives. I was someone that God was using. And all of a sudden, the good things of all that became part of my identity, which made it harder to make the decision that God was leading me to move on to a new path, like where I'm at today at Veritas Baptist College. So we all have to be willing to ask a question about, is our identity rooted in Christ, or is it rooted in our relationships, or our responsibilities, or other things? Clarifying that internal struggle will help us to see that external problem better. So learn how to slow down before you speed up. Understand what the facts are. Name the real problem. Identify what you're feeling, why you're feeling this. Number 4, clarify what you can control and what you can't. As we were going through the situation I alluded to at the beginning of this podcast, we met with a gentleman that was a Christian counselor. He was in the area doing some things at our church. And so we asked for a few minutes of his time, explained some of the things we were facing. And he just kept drawing these circles. And it was frustrating because I just wanted him to hear me and give me some things to do, I wanted him to fix it. And he kept saying, okay, so this falls here in the circle. And I said, great. This falls here, great. I don't know what the circle is. Oh, the circle is, the things in the circle are the things you can control. The things outside the circle are outside of your control. The things you're mentioning that are bringing you stress are outside the circle. I don't remember everything he said in that hour meeting or so, but I know that my wife and I have reused that illustration often with people that have had similar difficulties and similar crises and struggles, and we've just said, hey, let's draw a little circle here. What's causing the stress? Okay, that's over here. Okay, well, what's the circle? Oh, these are the things you can control. As a leader, we have to learn to clarify what we can control and what we can't. To do that, we have to gather facts from trusted sources that we can validate. I hope you'll understand this statement. When we attempt to treat the uncontrollable like it's controllable, all we're doing is adding to our confusion and adding to our anxiety. We're compounding the problem. But I often just, in a practical way, just challenge people, hey, make 2 lists. What you can change or what you can influence or what you can control and what you can't. And then focus on the list where you actually have influence and control. Sometimes just separating these 2 aspects can remove that paralyzing anxiety that we face in impossible moments. So identify what can be verified and separate that from what's based on fear, assumption, or hearsay. Step number 5, diagnose the root problem, that root issue that's causing this turmoil in your leadership, and discern what success looks like. Sometimes we're facing an emotional roadblock. Sometimes we're facing a spiritual issue or a financial issue. Sometimes we're dealing with something organizationally or culturally. Sometimes there's just personality conflicts and clashes. It happens. So what is non-negotiable in your current situation, and where can you compromise? Here's a question I like to ask myself. If I don't do anything, I do nothing, what's the cost of my inaction? Sometimes the cost of the inaction is higher than the cost of even a poor decision. Not always, sometimes. Another takeaway in this assessing the situation, invite a wise friend, a wise voice, a seasoned voice to speak into your circumstances. I've often went to people who are bridging women ministry than me. This was easier to do in the early days of ministry, right? Because everybody's ahead of you. Now we're a little over 3 decades in. Now there's people that are coming to us for perhaps they picture me as a seasoned counselor. I'm like, no, man, I still have a lot to learn. I'm still going over here, but it's an interesting journey, isn't it? You wake up one day and there's people that are now saying, hey, you've been through this. And you're like, yeah, I guess I have, but I didn't really want to talk about it. But wait a minute, the comfort God gave me, he gave it to me so that I could comfort others who are going through similar circumstances. And yet, even so, I'm sort of in this middle. I'm not in fourth quarter yet. Maybe I'm at halftime, but I still need people that I can trust, who can sort of look from the outside in and say, Mike, your emotions are clouding this. This is what's happening, and let me give you some perspective. I need that. I need somebody who can help me see my blind spots. And then just a final takeaway, practical step, as we try to assess the situation, pray for God's wisdom. He said that his word will be a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. So he can show us the next step. So we can move from, Lord, I just don't feel like I can move, to thank you, Lord, for showing me the next step. When you feel like you're facing really just an impossible set of circumstances, this first step simply says, take a moment. Get the God's eye view, if you will, of what's happening. Assess the situation. Slow down. Get the facts. Let people speak into your life. Ask God for wisdom. Know what success looks like going through this, and understand what doing nothing costs. Recognize what's in your control and what's out of your control, because spending time on what you can't control is just going to build anxiety and stress and keep you from moving forward. And want to trust God through the whole process. Anyway, I hope that's a help. I hope you'll read through some of those thoughts in a greater detail in that free resource. But I'm looking forward to discussing our next step in our next episode as we work through this process of how to go forward. How do we lead when the path isn't clear? We've all been there, and we're all going to arrive there soon. I pray God gives us wisdom to navigate correctly and biblically. Until next episode, I'll see you then. Thank you for tuning in to Worldview with J. Michael Lester. Look forward to seeing you in our next episode. God bless.
Thanks again for joining us for this episode of Worldview with Dr. Mike Lester. You can connect with Mike at jmichaellester.com, where you'll also find more discipleship resources. Mike also serves as the president of Veritas Baptist College, an online university dedicated to training ministry leaders virtually so that they can stay where God has called them. Learn more about Veritas at vbc.edu. This podcast is hosted by Dr. Mike Lester and produced by Luke Clayton and the team at increasecreative.co. We hope this episode has helped you grow in your journey of being a faithful disciple of Jesus. And we look forward to having you join us again right here on Worldview.